بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to the 36th lesson of the explanation of Mukhtaṣar al Targhīb wa Tarhīb, and inshallah we will be concluding the section relating to Salah today. And this chapter will be looking at Salatul Jumu'ah, and in particular chapter 6 here deals with warning relating to not praying or not attending the Jumu'ah prayer. So chapter 6, al-Tarhīb man taraka al-Jumu'ah bighayri udhrin, warning those who leave off the Jumu'ah prayer without a valid excuse. Ḥadīth 212 عن ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لقوم يتخلفون عن الجمعة لقد هممت أن آمر رجلا يصلي بالناس ثم أحرق على رجال يتخلفون عن الجمعة بيوتهم رواه مسلم. So in the authority of Abdullah bin Mas'ud, may Allah be pleased with him, who said that the Prophet ﷺ said regarding a group of people, or he said regarding a group of people who stayed or would not attend the Jumu'ah prayer, that لَقَدْ هَمَمْتُ أَنْ آمُرَ رَجُلًا, that I have thought of appointing a person to lead the people in prayer and then go to the homes of those who do not attend the prayer, the Jumu'ah prayer, and burn down their homes. And this hadith is reported by Sahih Muslim. So this hadith clearly indicates the obligatory nature of Salatul Jumu'ah, and that Salatul Jumu'ah is a fard ayn, it's an individual obligation upon those who are required to attend. So there is a fiqhi discussion in terms of who is specifically required to attend. So obviously males that are mature and live in an area where, an established area where there is Jumu'ah prayers performed, then it's an obligation upon them to attend the Jumu'ah prayers. There are some finer details in terms of who is not specifically required, what type of areas, built up areas, people that live on the outskirts of cities, Bedouins, etc. So there is some detail that is usually mentioned in the books of fiqh. But otherwise, for most people listening to this, they will fall into a situation where, attending the Jumu'ah prayer would be an obligation upon them. But putting aside the sort of legal issues in terms of it being an obligation, if you look at it from another perspective, which is, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala impose and make it an obligation to attend such a prayer? Right? Now, we know that prayer in and of itself is an obligation. أقم الصلاة لذكري, establish the prayer for my remembrance. So the fundamental, you could say, purpose of the prayer is to remember Allah in the most befitting way. Jumu'ah is clearly, it involves a prayer, but the key thing that it involves, which is not found in a daily prayer, is the khutbah, is the speech, right? And that's why, interestingly, if you look to the format of a Friday prayer, it consists of two prayers but two khutbahs, right? So as you know, the khatib, he sits down between the two parts of the speech. In the middle of the speech he sits down, thus there being two khutbahs, and then the prayer itself is two, right? So 2 and 2 together is 4, which is the basic number of rak'at for the dhuhr prayer. And there are some interesting discussions, like, do we say that Jumu'ah is like a replacement for dhuhr, and other related issues. But going back to the point, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it an obligation on people to attend this the khutbah itself, right? And so we have to ask ourselves, clearly there is a reason why it is so important. There's clearly, if Allah has made it an obligation, that means it's something which is very important. So the khutbah is the distinguishing thing that differentiates the entire service to a daily prayer. And so therefore we learn that it's divinely intended that a person listen to some form of instruction on a weekly basis. That we can't just live our lives just, doing the same thing of praying and fasting and reciting Quran, but we're not learning, we're not educating ourselves, we're not sort of rejuvenating our faith. And so the khutbah really holds that role. The role of the khutbah is to rejuvenate a person's faith, to keep them on track. All right. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His mercy, has made it an obligation upon us. Right? View it like that. It's an act of mercy, because due to the nature of human beings, we will find 1,000,001 excuses not to attend a lesson. Right? And that's a reality. The only reason why Jumu'ah, the attendance in Jumu'ahs are so high is because it's an obligation. Let's be frank. It isn't because people want to listen to an amazing khutbah. It's because they know if they don't go, they'll be sinful. Right? And that is a thing that they have to do. If it was not an obligation, the numbers would definitely drop. Okay? And so it's from the rahmah of Allah that Allah has made it an obligation, because it's for your benefit. And human beings are so prone to make excuses not to benefit themselves in the best possible way as Allah sees for them, that, as I said, they will make excuses, right, not to attend. So that's really, I think, an important point for us to reflect over. I remember, actually, I think I shared this before, that I once gave a series of khutbahs on the sort of ahkam of attending a masjid, and also I spoke about like the virtues of Jumu'ah, etc. Right? And which to be honest isn't a normal thing that I would normally do. Isn't a thing I would normally do, not something that I would encourage. But I made it clear to the musallin that, look, khutbah isn't meant to be a class. It's not meant to be a lecture. And I tried to make sure that it wasn't like a khutbah or a lecture, but it was generally very informative in the sense that it had a lot of information. It wasn't just general, exhortations and admonishments. There were clear, even fiqhi issues, adab related issues, etiquettes and what have you. And I had to tell people that, look, the only reason why I'm doing this was I know that if I was to give this speech elsewhere in a different format, like a reminder between Maghrib and Isha, or just a general lecture, people wouldn't attend, right? They would find some excuse not to attend. But I've got your attention now, right? So I'm going to utilize this attention to teach you something very important, right? And so, subhanallah, so just reflecting over our attendance to Jumu'ah, I think it really teaches us a lot, as a community. It says many good things. Right? Number one, that, people are concerned about not falling into sin. So that's a good thing. But it also teaches us that, that we as a community are often driven by things in a way which, in a way that indicates that we've kind of misunderstood something very important. So these obligations are meant to, are placed there to encourage you to benefit yourself, to do something good, right? So that should make us aware as people, okay, if attending a khutbah once a week is really important, I should, put a great deal of effort into listening to things which will benefit me, where I can learn, I can develop insight, where I can, learn more about Allah, learn more about my deen. Okay, but if we just view Jumu'ah just as purely as a ritual that is devoid of meaning, then, Jumu'ah just will be like one of those things we tick off our list of things to do on a weekly basis, which, we don't want to happen. Right? And as I said, often when I worked as an imam, when I would receive calls from the public, and a very common question people would call is to know, what time does the salah begin? What time does Jumu'ah begin? So I would say, the khutbah begins at 12:30, for example, but but they'll say, no, I want to know when the prayer is. And I'm like, but you have to attend the khutbah. It's like, I know, but I just want to know when the prayer is. Okay, which is a sad reality. Okay, now going back to the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ clearly was very vexed at the fact that there were people that were not attending the Jumu'ah prayers, and he fought to go to appoint someone to lead the people in prayer so that he can go to their homes and burn their homes down. Now, this is actually a hadith which often is conflated in a very similar wording, a hadith which seems to indicate that this is in reference to the daily jama'at prayers or congregational prayers, which is why many scholars say that those hadith that talk about the punishment that those people who do not attend the jama'ah prayers can potentially receive, it's actually in reference to Jumu'ah, right? That's what Ibn Ḥajar said, that we can understand those hadith in light of this hadith, right? Which says that the Prophet was actually talking about Jumu'ah, not jama'ah prayers. And that's why, as we've mentioned before, really majority of the scholars believe that it isn't a sin, or it's not an obligation to actually attend a daily congregational prayer. But we've explained that before. A question here is that, how could the Prophet ﷺ actually say this? Because as you know, Jumu'ah is only one Jumu'ah. There can only be one Jumu'ah in one locality. So how could the Prophet ﷺ say, I fought about appointing someone to lead the people in prayer? That would mean he would miss the Jumu'ah. So that's why the scholars, they say, no, the Prophet ﷺ said this not haqiqatan, meaning he didn't say this literally, right? That this is what he literally meant and what he literally intended. But this was a statement that was born out of mubalagha and that of taghliz, meaning the Prophet ﷺ was just trying to discourage them, right? And he was sort of using very hyperbolized language just to discourage people from missing the Jumu'ah itself. Wallahu a'lam. Hadith 213 وعن أبي الجعد الضمري رضي الله عنه وكانت له صحبة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من ترك 3 جمع تهاونا بها طبع الله على قلبه. رواه أحمد وأصحاب السنن وصححه ابن خزيمة وابن حبان والحاكم. وفي رواية لابن خزيمة من ترك الجمعة 3 من غير عذر فهو منافق. وذكره رزين فزاد فقد برئ من الله. وأخرجه أحمد بإسناد حسن وصححه الحاكم من حديث أبي قتادة نحو الأول. أخرجه ابن ماجه من حديث جابر. So on the authority of Abu al-Ja'ad al-Damri, in some prints it mentions Dumayri, but what seems to be more accurate is al-Damri. Abu al-Ja'ad al-Damri, may Allah be pleased with him. وَكَانَتْ لَهُ الصُّحْبَةِ, and it's meaning that it's reported that he accompanied the Prophet ﷺ for some time, right? Meaning that he's considered a Sahabi. The scholars dispute in terms of what was his real name, but anyhow, that's not the important thing at the moment. The Prophet, he heard from the Prophet ﷺ, or that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever abandons 3 Jumu'ahs tahawunan, out of laziness, طبع الله على قلبه, Allah would put a seal on his heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put a seal on his heart. And this is reported by Ahmad and the Sunan as well. And in the version of Ibn Khuzaymah, it says, whoever leaves 3 Jumu'ahs without an excuse, then he is a hypocrite. He is a munafiq. Right? And another hadith, it says, فَقَدْ بَرِئَ مِنَ اللَّهِ, meaning فَقَدْ بَرِئَ مِنَ اللَّهِ. Then whoever does this, then he is, he has absolved himself, or he has freed himself from Allah, meaning from the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these hadith are very severe warnings for those who miss Jumu'ah prayers. Now, it mentions free, and these hadith mention free. Whoever abandons free or misses free. Now, what does this mean to leave free Jumu'ahs? Because does it mean free consecutively? Does it mean free in 1 year, 3 Jumu'ahs in 1 year, or 3 Jumu'ahs in your lifetime. Right? All, these various, there are different views regards to what does it mean by free. I mean, there is a riwayah which mentions mutawaliyat, that whoever leaves 3 Jumu'ah prayers in a row, right, in a row, mutawaliyat, faqad nabadha al-Islam wara'a dhahri, then he has thrown the religion behind his back. He's like forsaken the religion. So there is that hadith, right, and similar wordings, and that was reported by Abu Ya'la. And this is, but the more common ones don't mention the riwayat, don't mention mutawaliyat, like consecutively. So, and some scholars even said that, alhamdulillah for that narration that mentions free, because, free consecutive, because it's more difficult to, it's more likely that a person, would miss maybe 3 Jumu'ahs in their life, right, then 3 in a row. To miss 3 in a row, it's a bigger thing, right, and it's more indicative of complete negligence. Now the hadith do stress that, or the hadith do mention, tahawunan min ghayri udhrin, without an excuse, out of laziness, right? Now this is, in the Muslim world, there's really no excuse to I mean, there is no excuse to miss Jumu'ah wherever you are, right? Unless you're physically incapable of doing so, right? But in the Muslim world, it's like a Sunday, like it is for here, where people won't work. Or in most cases, they'll provide provisions for people to be able to attend the Jumu'ah prayer. In the West, though, this is where it's a real challenge. People who are in higher education, or school, or higher education, or working, because Friday is a working day of the week. And so it becomes a real issue. Some people struggle to be able to find a place or the opportunity to pray Jumu'ah. Now, what I would say in that situation is that a person should always go into a job having made clear to his employers that he is a person who takes his prayers very seriously, and that that's something that he doesn't want to compromise on. And so if there's a way that he can somehow incorporate his daily prayers, in particular on Fridays, into his schedule, or into his lunch break, for example, then that's very, very important to him. So, and in most cases, you find most people are successful in arranging something. Now, there does happen the odd time where it's literally impossible, where you can't be given a break and what have you. So in that situation, what does a person do? Well, you try your hardest. That's the key thing. Do we tell a person that he quits his job because he will probably miss one khutbah every so often? That's very difficult to say that. If a person does choose to do that, alhamdulillah, right? And but if they ever in financial difficulties and what have you, then there is scope. A person can maybe get a fatwa from a scholar regarding his situation. But either way, a person should strive their best, their hardest to incorporate their Jumu'ah prayers into their lunch breaks and into their time at work. So yes, the hadith, and what's significant about free, because free is, as you know, that's the basic plural in the Arabic language. You have the singular, the dual, and free, and free is considered to be a sign of something being plentiful, right? It's in the plural form. It means so this indicates that the person has missed a significant amount of Jumu'ah prayers. And as I said, there is a wording that mentions mutawaliyat, 3 consecutive prayers, according to one riwayah. The hadith is, what's the consequence of that? So in the first hadith that we read, 213, طبع الله على قلبي, Allah will put a seal on his heart. Now, what does it mean, a seal? طبع or khatama. In another version, it says khatama, right? Which again can be translated as to mean seal. putting a seal on the heart of the person implies, according to many scholars, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will prevent goodness reaching that person's heart. Okay, and i'damul lutf wa asbabul khair, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will prevent lutf, meaning divine grace, reaching that person's heart. Right, so he is essentially barred from a type of divine grace and support from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is obviously very worrying. Some say no, taba'a means, it means kufr, right, which has been explained by some, but I think that's be difficult to say. Now, yes, there is a version that says here that whoever misses 3 Jumu'ahs without an excuse, فَهُوَ munafiq, then he is a munafiq, right, then he is a hypocrite. Here it doesn't mean the hypocrite which is في الدرك الأسفل من النار, the one who will be in the lowest pits in the hellfire, meaning he is like a hypocrite. He is like a hypocrite, because the hypocrites were known for sometimes, وَإِذَا قَامُوا إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ قَامُوا كُسَالًا, like they would, when they stand up to pray, they would stand up lazy, يُرَاءُونَ النَّاسِ, just to show off. And so Jumu'ah was probably a good opportunity for them to miss the prayer, because there'll be so many people, it will be difficult to assess who has come and who hasn't, right? But otherwise, the sort of daily congregations, which are usually smaller, it will be therefore easier to tell who has attended and who hasn't. But a Jumu'ah is too big for a person for the imam or for the, to see who has come and who hasn't. Right? So therefore, if you miss 3 Jumu'ahs without an excuse, then you are like that hypocrite. Okay. And that concludes that section. And the final section here this is chapter 7, al-Targhīb فيما يقرأ وفيما يقرأ يوم الجمعة. An encouragement to recite on Jumu'ah, or what to recite on Jumu'ah. So Ḥadīth 214 عن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنه قال أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من قرأ سورة الكهف في يوم الجمعة أضاء له من النور ما بين الجمعتين. رواه النسائي والبيحقي مرفوعا وصححه الحاكم. So in the authority Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, may Allah be pleased with him, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said that whoever recites Surah al-Kahf on Jumu'ah, it will provide light for him, or Allah will give him a light that will extend, between the 2 Jumu'ahs, meaning between that Jumu'ah and the Jumu'ah to come. So in another version of the hadith, in the version of Darimi as well, it also says Man qara'a laylat al-Jumu'ah, whoever recites on Jumu'ah night, right, which is technically from Thursday, Maghrib onwards, then that's Jumu'ah night as well. So it's something that you can do on the Jumu'ah day itself, right, up until Salat al-Maghrib, or from the night before. So that's one thing. The second thing is why Jumu'ah? Why whoever recites this surah on Jumu'ah? So we need to think about Jumu'ah, and we need to think about what's special about this surah, and then that makes, it sort of, how does it connect with Jumu'ah? And then also we need to look at the reward itself, this ida'ah, this illumination and this light that is given. So, these are important discussions to have. So the first thing is Jumu'ah. Why on Jumu'ah itself? Well, Jumu'ah, as you know, is Sayyidul Ayyam, right? It's the best day during the week. It's a type of Eid. And on virtuous days, it's also encouraged to increase in ibadah, right? So it's a day of salah, it's a day of charity, it's a day of dhikr, it's a day of listening to the speech. It's a day of increased ta'ah, of increased reward. And so it's encouraged to increase in our recitation of the Quran. The question here, though, is why Surah al-Kahf? Now, Surah al-Kahf is a surah which, if you look at the surah itself, Surah Kahf, it means the cave. And the name of the surah is taken after the story of the Fitya, of the young group of people who sought refuge in a cave to escape from the suppression and the oppression of the people of the town that they lived in, where they were idolaters and they were essentially persecuting the young believers for believing in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the cave is a symbol of protection, right? It's a symbol of youth going there to seek shelter from the harms of the fitan, the trials and tribulations of disbelief. But if you look to the surah as well, there are also other stories that are mentioned which also are similar to the story of the people in the cave. So what are the other major stories in Surah Al-Kahf? Well, the story of Musa and Khadir and the journey that they went on. And that is also a story of tribulation. But this time not a tribulation of kufr and disbelief, but a tribulation of knowledge. Because if you look to the origins of the story of Musa and Khadir, the people once asked Musa alayhi salam that, do you know anyone who is more knowledgeable than you? Right? And he said, I don't know of anyone more knowledgeable than me upon this earth. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to teach him a lesson with regards to his knowledge. And so Allah had bestowed upon this man information which Musa was unaware of. And the journey explains that, right? Everything in the journey expounds upon that. Right? The man, denting or causing a hole in the people's boat, or killing a young child, right? Building a wall for a group of people that were very hostile or not very hospitable to them, right? And so, but Khadir knew certain things that Musa didn't know, right? Which, as a result, because Musa, he didn't know what Khadir knew, it made him react to what he saw in a different way, which indicates that the knowledge that you have, right? We are tested by what we know. And so that was a story about, the tribulations associated with ilm, with knowledge. And that could be expanded upon in more detail. And then you have the story of the Jannatain, the people of the two gardens, and how one was afflicted, or one was tested with his desire for wealth and beauty, and which made him, sort of disconnect from the sources of all blessings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he ended up denying and being a very ungrateful servant. That was a test of wealth. And then you have the story of Dhul Qarnayn, right? This great ruler who roamed the earth and enjoyed great power and authority. This was the fitna of power and authority. So the whole story really is about how to deal with the trials of life. The trials of disbelief, the trials of knowledge, the trials of wealth, and the trials of power. And interestingly, we know that this is a surah which in some reports mention that if a person learns the first 10 ayat or the last 10 ayat, according to one report, he will or she will be protected from the trials of the Dajjal. And that's quite clear, because the Dajjal is going to be the greatest test for people on earth, right? The greatest fitna, to the extent that the Prophet ﷺ would seek refuge in Allah from the fitna of the Dajjal in all of his prayers, right? So Surah Kahf can help to protect a person from that, okay? Because it's a surah that teaches you how to protect yourself from trials and tribulations. So the more a person is aware of this surah and that surah is close to their heart, the more guidance and protection it can provide a person. But then the question is, okay, so we know the virtue of Friday, we know the significance of Surah Al-Kahf, but what's the connection between those two things, Jumu'ah and Kahf? So Friday, as we know, is a day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created Adam, He sent him down upon this earth, right? So Friday is a symbolic day because it really symbolizes our existence on this earth. This was the day Allah created Adam, and this is the day that he was sent down to earth, right? And so really, this is a day that symbolizes our existence, our origins, and how our purpose in life is a test. right? It's Allah to test us, right? And so Friday reminds us of this. It's a day that the Day of Judgment will be established as well. The trumpet will be blown on a Friday. Okay, and so, it's such a pivotal day. It reminds us of our beginnings, reminds us of our origins and our end. And how everything, therefore our existence on this earth is a test in entirety. And what greater surah reflects the nature of tests than Surah al-Kahf? And so Surah al-Kahf, the cave, right? A place of refuge. And that's the idea, that we turn to the Quran for guidance, to see how we can protect ourselves from the various trials and tribulations in life. Hence it's encouraged to recite the surah on that day. This hadith, though, it's inshallah an authentic hadith, but it's not a rigorously authentic hadith, and that's why some scholars even consider that it contains some weakness in it. But it's a practice which has been practiced for centuries and generally encouraged by the scholars. What I would say, though, is I think we need to look beyond the sort of ritualism which is associated with reciting Surah Kahf on a Friday. Sadly, you find many people, they encourage people, they recite it, but they haven't a clue, right, why they recite it. They don't even know what the surah is about. And that's the saddest reality. To think that the Prophet ﷺ encouraged people to recite this surah because of the profound effects that it has, because of the guidance that is found within the surah. So he's encouraging people to recite it so they can become closer to it. But the only thing we're doing is just reciting it and not actually becoming close to the surah by understanding it and reflecting upon its meanings. And that's, we've sort of missed the mark in that perspective. And look at the reward. أَضَاءَ لَهُ مِنَ النُّورِ مَا بَيْنَ الْجُمْعَتَيْنِ. It provides a person a light. Right? A light. It illuminates your path. Because why? Because this surah is equipping you with guidance by which you can see through the darkness of tribulations. Right? Now there is a discussion amongst the Mufassirin, what type of light is this? Where will it occur? Right? Is it a light in sort of the grave that you will have? Is it a light on the Yawmul, Qiyamah? Or is it a light in your heart? I mean, that's something that I think is probably more in line with the overall concept, right? But it's a light that occurs in your heart. Some say it's a light that will extend from you to the heavens. Right? Somebody who I seem to indicate something like that. But the idea is, I think it's more figurative in meaning that there is a light that shines from you as a result of being attached to this surah. So, wallahu alam, and that really concludes that section. And also Kitab as-Salah. The next section is Kitab as-Sadaqat. I thought we might start it, but actually I think it's probably a good time to conclude for today. So inshallah next week we'll start with Kitab al-Sadaqat, the book of charity, inshallah. If there are any comments or questions, feel free to ask now. Otherwise we'll conclude there for today, inshallah. Okay, I think we'll conclude there for today then. Inshallah, I hope to see you next week. Inshallah ta'ala. جزاكم الله خيرا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك، أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.